Yo, Challenger Coach in here. So I want to react to the new patch Rise games release. So Ashe is getting a slight buff, 5% damage buff, as you can see on her passive, and also her W gets a 10% 10 damage, my bad. Right? Now her arrow gets a 20% AP damage. So support Ashe will be a bit stronger, right? And also AD carry Ashe. So what does this even mean? Um, Generally speaking, she won't be broken or anything. Her early game will be a bit more oppressive. Her scaling will be a teensy bit better. Her AP build will be a bit better. It's very pretty much just a slight buff. Um, that just like gives some spotlight to Ashe because she's not a 2-2 pick champion generally. So this will definitely help her a bit here and there. Gangplank gets a buff because he's pretty much a shit champion ever since they changed his E. So right now it has from 18 seconds, right? They just pulled it down to 17, 16, 15, 40 seconds, which makes his scaling a bit better. His later game, late mid game wave clear a bit more frequent. His DPS gonna be higher, of course, so his scaling gonna be generally better, right? Which also are gonna allow him to push towers a bit faster and get objectives down faster because he gets his passive resets, which also work into towers. Plus he gets shin procs every time he uses his E, which means he will be able to push towers faster, get objectives, monster camps, minions, champion kills, and so on faster, right? It's definitely a decent buff. Now, Gragas. Finally, Gragas gets nerfed, right? Uh, so his passive right now has a 12 seconds and not an 8-second cooldown because it always feels like you're always losing trades into Gragas, right? In lane and in the jungle, like you go for a trade on him, he trades into you, but then after a minute he's just full HP, right? Because of his OP broken passive. Right now it has 4 more seconds, which means it's less so frequent. So you can actually trade into Gragas more easily in lane, and in the jungle he will have definitely less sustain, which gonna affect him to some degree. But I like this laning phase buff at least. So they buffed Gragas' Q. Right now it will cost 80, 75, 70, 65, 60 mana, which is definitely great because this ability costs so much mana, right? Um, it's gonna definitely be a good change at least. Like mana wise, his Q costs less mana even though his healing is less so frequent. He's still gonna be definitely a decent champion. It's an nerf to his sustain, but it's definitely he gonna be definitely a great champion still, from my own opinion. Now, footwork Santesi got nerfed. It has 1.5 seconds more cooldown. Uh, this is definitely a good change because anybody that played into Cassante, it feels like he has to shield way too often to disengage, to go for a short trade, and it's kind of hard to match it. That's the truth about it, right? So just nerfing it slightly, it allows people to go for more smoother trades, I suppose, and his disengage is less so frequent, right? His trades are less so frequent. So this is like mainly a nerf to his like in lane trades. Then in late mid game, he has a bit less mobility, which generally means that it's harder to, let's say, kill an AD carry, right? Okay, decent changes. So Kai'Sa gets an attack damage buff. Although I don't feel like Kai'Sa was all that bad in this patch. She deserves a little bit of a attention from Riot Games. So it means like, let's say at like level 10, right? You're gonna have like 5 dot something more AD. So this bonus AD will allow you to, I suppose, get your Q upgrade slightly faster than before, right? And from the other hand, helps you with your Q, of course, with your abilities that scale with AD. It helps your DPS generally speaking, right? So even Riot Games has written it down himself. Our goal with these changes is to make her Q evolution feel better. For example, this would grant her a Q evolution at level 9, as I said. You can get an earlier Q evolution with Stormrazor start and with these current buffs, right? Pickaxe, Orange Blade, and one adaptive instead of having to wait until level 11. So it spikes a little bit faster than normally. Definitely great buff. Kha'Zix gets a bit nerfed because he is just too much on the top, so his early game is slightly less potent. It's gonna affect his early game ganks, skirmishes, and of course jungle clear. Uh, it sucks a bit because slowing down his clear can mess with the champion's solidity. Then the other thing is it's like this is definitely a nerf because Kha'Zix's Q scales with a lot of AD, right? And even removing the 3 AD definitely cut some of his damage, right, from his Q. Um, this looks like a small nerf, but it's gonna more so drastically affect, I feel like, his early game ganks. Especially in games where he's gonna go more even and he doesn't get like no slow kills. Kog'Maw finally gets nerfed, as I said, like he's also by 0.5 percentage, he's doubly gonna deal less damage because right now on-hit items are so great on Kog'Maw. That's the reasoning behind of why like Kog'Maw gets nerfed, of course. Simply said, he's gonna have less DPS than before, but he's still gonna be an okay champion from my opinion. Lucian, again, is too oppressive with Milio, is too oppressive with Nami still. So they decided to sort of nerf his passive DPS by flat 4 and 5 percentage, right? Aside of that, right now, when Lucian is healed or shielded by an ally, or when nearby enemy champion is immobilized, his next two basic attacks will deal bonus magic damage. So right now, Lucian works also really well with engaging supports because they also proc Lucian's Light Bringer. Light Slinger, not Bringer. Light Slinger. So this is a buff when you have an engager support on Lucian, right? It's still gonna be less DPS, of course, but it's a buff in some sense. Even Nami has like two CC abilities, her Q and her ult, so she can actually apply Lucian's passive a bit more frequently if she hits her abilities. It's gonna deal less damage, so I think Nami can provide him now a bit more DPS as I see it, right? If she hits everything, of course. But it's gonna deal less damage, so I suppose this is a bit of a burst damage nerf, but at the same time it provides him more DPS, right? Interesting changes. Now let's move to Lulu. So, finally they nerf Lulu because on-hit items are strong. That's the same reason why Lulu gets nerfed, because Lulu is strong with on-hit champions, simply said, right? So right now she's gonna have slightly less armor, which is gonna make her early game more vulnerable to double AD champs, like say they have like a whatever Samira Pike bot lane duo, right? She gonna have a less oppressive early game right now, so she deals 6 less damage with her passive, which is actually quite big, and the shield value is smaller by 20 in the late game. So this pretty much means that Lulu will be weakened. It's still gonna be an okay pick, it's just her early game gonna be drastically weaker. So champions that Pike and Senna and anything that can like sort of oppress Lulu early on uh, will probably screw her, right? Um, that's how I feel like her early game potency is just like way weaker. Even bully supports like Serat and this type of brand champions will be way stronger into Lulu. Like her early game is sort of gutted. So this is a bigger early game nerf. But look at the positive side. What's gonna happen? She's still gonna be like an okay pillar, okay scaler from my own opinion. Even though they nerfed a little bit of scaling here and there, but I think it's still a playable champion. Now, let's go to Milio. Same nerfs as Lulu. Armor growth less. Holy hell! 4.9 armor growth on a support. That's a bit a lot if you ask me. Empowered attack damage. So they nerfed its attack damage, right? By 50 percentage, right? So they pushed it down to 50 percentage, my bad, right? Now, this means that his DPS gonna be less in mid late game. He gonna provide less DPS later on. His early game gonna be similar. Well, it's just pretty much all about like Milio has a lot of peel in his kit, right? His E shield speeds up people, W heals, ult heals a lot, and also cleanses people, then his Q peels, right? So the champion is not supposed to like push out so much damage, right? While he's also has a such a defensive kit. So that's just like the point of the whole thing. So his passive should deal some damage, not a lot, like 35% is kind of a lot, right? His passive should deal some damage because he has such a protective kit, right? Nasus finally gets a buff. This champion is kind of... Maybe we will see Nasus in the pro play. I'm just kind of thinking maybe we will see some Nasus in pro play. So he's gonna get 2% more lifesteal, healthier laning phase, better scaling, healing, right? And also his ultimate gonna be a bit more frequent by 20 and in the late game by 40 seconds. This generally gonna allow him to split push more often than usual. It's definitely a great buff. Duel a bit more often. Go for this 1v9 fights. Uh, it's It's a great buff, honest opinion. This is a great buff because in the late game 40 cooldown is quite a lot, right? So Nasus can end games faster, as I feel like, with this ultimate because he can use it more frequently to just push towers as well, right? Duel and so on. So this is definitely a great buff. He will be even better in low elo. In high elo, it's still questionable how good Nasus will be, but I feel like after these changes, we're gonna see more high elo Nasus, from my own opinion. um, Orianna buff. So she gets a flat 50 damage at level 11 in her ultimate, and also 5% damage buff, which definitely, I think it's gonna feel like that she deals damage, right? So now it's gonna feel like that Orianna does actually some decent damage with her ultimate, because before she could actually one shot, Orianna could one shot, but now she can't really one shot these days, right? So that 50 damage and that 5% is definitely gonna go really well. It's gonna allow her just to deal a bit more damage, which often is just enough to kill someone, right? It's like one less basic attack amount of damage usually than before. So finally they changed Ra's adaptive force to ability power because she has no AD ratio. I don't know why does she have attack damage adaptive force when she has no AP ratio, right? Now this is a good change because in the jungle this matters a lot because all of her abilities scale with AP. And her clear gonna be generally faster if you go double adaptive, right? Now, Shattering Strike. Her Q's cast time gonna be a bit faster, which means it's harder to react to, and also it's easier to chain it up after an ability. Now we can also see that the damage got slightly lowered by 10, but also the monster damage won't deal a 300% base damage anymore. It will have a flat damage buff, so I suppose it's sort of like a tank buff, right? This is the same thing, like that. They don't want like AP rel to clear too fast, I assume, and they rather wanted to give it some flat values because when people go with rel in the jungle, it's kind of like the Maokai Q change, right? Like people often will go for a tank build on rel, right, and not an AP build, which means later on in mid late game her clear will be slowed. But because they added some flat damage on it instead of percentage, this will allow tank rel to be more viable in the jungle. Same thing applies in here, same thing applies in here. Now E full tilt, they did something in here, did they? So, uh, magic damage, 4 percentage health, 3 percentage of the people's max health. So it's gonna deal a little bit less damage as I see it. But percent damage cap against monsters is 150 now, and there is also like a base damage. So he's gonna deal a bit less damage. So now Rumble, these are bigger changes, right? His early game got a teensy bit nerfed. He has like a half basic attack amount of less HP right now. His base health regen been nerfed a teensy bit, but his health growth is higher by 6, right? Now, Junkyard Titan, his passive. Now it takes 150 heat to overheat, and not 100. Okay. Now, danger zone is still plus 50, of course. Overheat, monster damage cap. So, right now it's gonna deal 65 to 150. So, scaling wise, it means you're gonna have more DPS into monsters. Overheat attack speed gonna be higher by 30 up to 130 percentage, which means your duel is gonna be a bit more potent. Now, some people may argue, okay, it provides more attack speed, but it lasts less. So, what does that mean? More than often, when you finish your passive, most of the champions are already dead. That's the thing. You don't need 5.75 seconds to kill someone. So more attack speed with less duration is totally fine in most cases. Now, magic damage. It's gonna deal less flat damage, which means this is sort of an early game, mid game nerf, right? In mid lane, it's an early game, mid lane nerf, right? But in the top lane, it's gonna generally deal more damage because top laners have so much HP at level 4. Often, a lot of them have 1k or above at level 4. So this is sort of an anti-tank, anti-bruiser nerf, right? Especially good into champs like Cho'Gath, right? Mundo, so on. Minion damage modifier. So he deals a bit less damage to minions, but he also has a monster cap on percentage health damage to 65 to 30. Now shield value. The shield gonna be a bit smaller, as we can see it, right? The flat is a bit smaller, but the good thing is that now it scales with 4 percentage health. Now will that be smaller or bigger? I think it will be slightly bigger, but the AP ratio is smaller, right? So I think in his early game, he's gonna get bigger shields. Harpoon, it provides 20 more, of course, heat, but his cooldown has, right? His ult cooldown is 30 more, right? And 10 more in the late game. So I think I didn't limit test it yet, of course, in the jungle, but what this will mean that it's harder to overheat right now to all-in people, even though he gives 20 heat. So it means that generally speaking, you will be able to poke more often with your easy mid-late game around objectives before you overheat, which it can be a positive side of Rumble, right? Your Q deals more damage into high HP champs, and after like how much HP? After like 1000 something, 1300, 400, your Q gonna deal generally more damage than before, or how much? Wait. Let's say let's say like 10 percentage of like 1000, right? It's 100, it's simple math, right? So you're gonna have 295. Now if someone has like 140, right? Like if I type say like 10 percentage of 1400, then we're gonna get 140, right? So 140 plus 195. Basically, at this stage of the game, you're gonna deal almost as much as you did before, right? As we can see, 335. So almost the same amount when someone has 1400. Now, anything above like, let's say like 1450, right? Will deal more damage. So after this amount of HP, will anything like, I think it will just deal more and more and more. So if I type like plus 195, that's his current damage, we can see it with our eyes at 350, right? So at 1450 HP, we're gonna deal the same damage as before, right? And after that, we're gonna deal progressively more and more, which generally speaking is a buff in mid-late game. It's a bit of a nerf early on, so his early game is a bit less oppressive. Now, Ryze is gonna be back in the meta, as I feel like. He gets a 4% damage buff on his passive, which is huger than it seems like. And magic damage, So, what do they change? 5% damage buff, and the missile speed, right? So you're gonna have more DPS, generally speaking, right? You're gonna be more viable, and also his missile speed gonna be faster, so it's easier to EQ in melee range, and it's easier to go for trades in lane by Eing a minion, then it bounces off the champion, then you kill it. EW is gonna be a bit better, so it's easier to like disengage, slightly faster to disengage or engage, I suppose. It's just gonna make his like combination of abilities a bit faster, right? His fast combos are gonna be a bit faster, so you're gonna have a bit more DPS, and I guess it's harder for people to react to his EW, because often the Yasuo players just like W rises E, so he doesn't like W's him up front if the jungler comes, so often these players E rises E, so into champions that can react in some ways to rises E. Now it will be way harder with that 5% 500 missile speed. Okay, severe. So attack damage growth 2.8 to 2.5. So she's gonna have a bit less DPS, while they also buffed her W, which is a bit weird. So she's gonna be the same as before, except her Q and basic attack still less damage. Something like that, honestly. It's gonna slightly affect her, but I feel like she's still gonna be like an okay champion. Maybe just like a teensy bit is gonna affect her, but then it's weird because they buff her W's damage, right? Yumi, again, they nerf Yumi. So best friend will provide less overall shielding and healing power. Early on, it's gonna provide 5% less, later on 5% less, right? From the other hand, the shield value gonna be flat 10 smaller early on, 10 by 30. Attack speed buff 35%, right? Goes down to 25, and in the later levels it's gonna be 35% again. So it's an early game buff, which means that Zeriumi will be less oppressive early on. And heal per hit. So she's gonna heal less per hit. So it's gonna more so drastically affect this champion, and I mean this is a hard to balance champion, right? I feel like she's gonna be borderline useless after these changes. Finally, they nerf Zeri, so she's gonna have slightly more movement speed. Not so fast. The passive where Zeri steals 45% of the shields she damages and gains 10% bonus movement speed for 2 seconds whenever she receives a shield has been removed. Finally! That passive been broken, especially in pro play. Like, it's not only that she destroys the shields in no time, she also provides it to herself. So it's really difficult to pick enchanters into Zeri or shield champs in general, right? Like if there are shield champs, it just feels like if Zeri is open, she's just gonna steal them away. I mean, not that's not the only issue. Zeri was broken, right? It's not only that we have shields. Oh shit, they may be gonna pick Zeri. Zeri was broken, right? Um, Now from the other hand, Q passive goes here. Q burst fire passive has been moved to Zeri's primary passive. Okay. Q burst fire. Q passive. Q passive to passive. Q passive has been moved to to be Zeri's primary passive. Trinity no more. Q burst fire no longer activates Shin. So this kind of sucks not only for how's it called, like for Trinity, for Zeri, but just a reminder for you guys, Essence River doesn't work on her Q anymore, which sucks a bit. But later on she gonna deal extra damage, right? By 50% extra crit damage. So what does this mean? She has less mobility and she will be weaker into champions that have shields because she doesn't steal them away. That was kind of a broken mechanic from my own opinion on a champion that's already strong. From the other hand, Bruiser Zeri is not worth anymore. E-Spark Search. So Crit Zeri will be still okay. I don't feel like this is the death of the champion. It's just like one thing, like this passive change, I'm like, maybe it's gonna be the death of the champion. Like, she's still gonna have crit DPS, but she won't have that much mobility and shield steal anymore. Which, like, I think crit builds will be still viable, but these are some drastic nerfs. I would say, like, go crit and see how it feels like. Ardent Sensor gets nerfed because only daily carries are strong. That's it. That's it, actually. Um, by 15 in the late game. So maybe we'll see less Ardent Sensors, Bloodthirster, nerfed, obvious reasons. It costs 2 less for its value, provides shit ton of AD, shit ton of stats for its price, right? Okay, so Gale Force 5 damage nerf. Now Cloud Burst active damage 150 to 350, scales with 200% critical chance. Now it scales with 45 bonus percentage bonus 80, right? 45 percentage bonus 80. And it's gonna have the same flat amount of damage, except it's like 5 damage nerf. So Riot Games says it himself, might be pleased to know it takes 4 bonus attack damage to match the damage from the old crit scaling. So you gotta have over 444 damage. So this is gonna be still a okay Jhin item actually. And in the late game, I think it may even gonna deal more damage. I'm not 100% sure in this one. Shield Bow, 3% lifesteal buff, definitely great. It's gonna make AD carries a bit more tanky. Because of the healing itself, it's a bit harder to kill AD carries right now with Immortal Shield Bow. Yasuo players and Yon players value this a lot, having some extra healing as well. It's just gonna make people a bit more tank. They're gonna heal a bit more, right? A bit more sustained. Now, coordinated fire application. This item used to be really strong on Victor, on Gragas, right? Champions that can apply Imperial Mandate because it's such a low cost item. So coordinated fire application. It's gonna deal 5 less damage and 15 less damage in the late game. Now the proc itself gonna deal more damage early on, but later on it's gonna deal 30 less damage, which messes with the item scaling, but it's still gonna be a decent snowball item. But it also gonna provide 5% more movement speed, right? Monster Reviewer. So it's gonna heal more early on, of course, which is a great early game nerf. Then the shielding power gonna be 40%, so it's stronger in the early game. It heals more in the early game. It shields more in the early game. Same target heal bonus, 50% to 30%. It's gonna heal more early on, right? Same target shield bonus, it's gonna shield more early on. In the mythic passive, heal and shielding power by 5. This definitely gonna like be really OP right now on Sona on champions that generally want to rush a defensive item. Now it will be extremely defensive early on. Maybe we will even see some fun stuff like Sacred Moonstone or something like that. I'm not even sure. But it's typically gonna buff like champions like Sona in the early game that like to go Moonstone because they're gonna be way more defensive. Phantom Dancer gets a 5% DPS attack speed buff, right? Because everybody else goes for anything else but Phantom Dancer because of don't hit items are strong. Uh, Energize damage. So it's gonna deal way less damage later on. sadly, sadly. So it's gonna deal 80 damage later on, and it's gonna have 60 damage as before early on. This means that it's still gonna be okay on champions like Jinx, right? Jinx in some games Gate. You still should build it. It's just it's worse DPS wise. So if you value DPS now, maybe just go for Bloodthirst or Lordom something. It's gonna be worse, but it's still gonna be a usable item. Static Shift gets a good buff. So earlier on it deals 80 more damage, and later on it deals 10 less. So what does this mean? It's easier to clear right now backline minions early on, right? So that was the issue before. Static Shiv is meant to be your best source of wave clear without just one-shotting the caster minions. It's still a bit underpowered. So the damage is being ramped up in the early game in order to more closely align with the minions health bar. So before, the issue with Static Shiv was if you don't build AP, you couldn't all the time wave clear the backline minions, and now you can just pretty much wipe them, right? Also gonna help you just slightly to clear the cannon and the melee minions as well, not only the range ones, so this gonna allow Static Shift to have a bit of a better wave clear. Now, shield value. From 20 to 300, they moved it to 11 percentage maximum health, so what does this even mean? Uh, Aphelios gets more shielding levels 1.5, but this is overall a significant nerf otherwise. So the shield is a bit of oppressive on AD carries because it's hard to kill them, and now it's gonna provide them less shielding. The good thing is that champions like Led gonna get actually more shield out of overheal, and champions like Mundo. But typically on those champions, people most likely still gonna go Triumph. Generally on HP stackers in the late mid game, it's gonna provide more shielding. Now for champions like Graves that go Trinity Force and Black Cleaver, uh, or champions that go like Kindred, right? Champions that go Trinity Force, Black Cleaver, like Kindred in a jungle, for example, they gonna potentially get more value at some point out of this overheal instead of like having these flat values as before. Um, so mid lane gets like one less gold if I one more gold. A fair bit ago we nerfed mid lane minion gold to reduce mid lane's agency at early points in the game. While this was successful, the risk of nerfing mid lane mages over roamers has indeed become a reality and placed mages into not so great spot, bro. When mages are not useful, man. Mages are not bad though. This is certainly not the only issue with mid lane mages, but is one that we think we can mitigate. Here comes the money. Mid lane minions are worth one less gold each before 40 minutes. Mid lane minions are worth the same gold. I don't know if there was a reason for this change, but okay. Red buff, so it's gonna have less DPS, of course, apparently. And the slow amount will be worse. The slow amount 10, 15, 25, right? So later on it's gonna slow less, and later on it's gonna heal less. Um, Happily it doesn't affect like the of course the early game. Now here are some ARAM adjustments. I mean nobody really plays ARAM or cares about it, so we're just gonna skip it. Some skins here and there, bug fixes. I mean probably nothing significant we'll find here, right? So I'm not gonna really go through like the bug fixes as well because this video is long enough already. Um, that's it from now. If you have any questions or things that you want to be clarified in the comment section or anything smart to add to this video, definitely leave a comment under this video. Have a nice day.